Hello again and welcome back to this next tutorial on making a game using Pygame. So today we're going to add scoring functionality to our game, but before we get cracking we're just going to tidy up a few things in our code. This is where we ended up last time. I'm just going to move some of the variables that we use up to the top of the code simply to make our code a little bit neater and a little bit more readable as we progress. So these colours, I'm going to put this right at the top of the screen because they're basically constants, so they're not going to get reused anywhere, they're not going to get changed anywhere, so we have them defined at the top of our code because we're using them as if they were constants. We're then going to also put up towards the top some of our initial setup code, so the images loading. It's a good idea to have at the top of the code because, you know, again, we'll probably add more images as we go, so it's nice to have them in a place where, you know, they're easy to see and easy to manipulate when we open our game file. And the last thing we're going to stick to the top is our screen height and screen width because, again, you know, that's something we may well change later on. If we want to change some things in our game, we might want to make the screen bigger, for example. So again, it makes sense to have these all set up right at the top of our code. Doesn't affect the running of the game in any way, but it does make maintenance easier later on. Okay, so now we've done that, we will start setting up a variable for score. So first off, we have to make the variable, so we just give it a name, score, and we set it equal to 0 because, you know, when the game starts you haven't scored anything yet, so we need to give it an initial value. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to, again, just neaten up our code slightly by creating a main function for our actual game. So what we'll want is just above where we've got set the object's current coordinates, we're going to define a new function called main, like so. So def main, that will define it, and it's going to take one parameter, which will be score. So a parameter is like a variable which can hold a value which gets passed to the function or subroutine. So we can send something now to our subroutine, it will get stored in the parameter we've called score. Now, for all of the main code to belong in our subroutine called main, we'll need to move it all in. So it all needs to be indented by one tab. Now, there's a very easy way of doing this. If you don't do it this way, you're very likely to make a mistake. So you literally highlight all of the code, and it's the main loop, it's the collision detection, all of the key presses, all the way down to clock tick 60. So you scroll down all the way to here and make sure everything's highlighted, and then in one click we can go format, indent region, and everything moves over neatly without breaking anything. So now we've got a main function which has everything we need to use. Now, why do we do this? It makes the code more maintainable. So having everything split up does make it easier to maintain the code. But more importantly that for us, it means we're going to want to put in a button to replay the game at some point, so it doesn't just end. Now, if we have it all in a subroutine, we can just call the subroutine again to restart the game. So it means as we go forward with these tutorials, we can do more with our code. Now, a subroutine doesn't do anything unless you call it. So we're going to have to call it to start off our game. So we'll do that down here right towards the bottom, just above pygame.quit. And that's how we do it. We just use the name of the subroutine, which is main, and we're going to pass it that value of score, which at the moment is 0. Okay? So the next thing we need to do is we need to give them a score. So we need to add something to the score. Now, the central place to do this is here. So basically, if y1 is greater than 500, it means the truck has passed off the bottom of the screen. So therefore, that's a good place to add one to the score because, you know, they haven't crashed. So they get a point for not crashing. So if we go score equals score plus 1, that means whenever you've successfully dodged the truck, you get 1 added to the score. Now, this will work, but nothing will yet appear on our screen. So we need to write another subroutine now, which will basically print print the score to the actual screen, and we're going to do that in a very similar way to what we did before. So we're going to make another subroutine here. Make sure your cursor's right on the edge, and we're going to call it Scoreboard because it's going to give us our score printed to the screen. And just like before, we're going to create a font to start with. So we're going to do this. We're going to again comment our code so it's nice and easy to read later on. So we're making our font, and as we learned before, that's the type of font we're going to use, and that's going to be the size. So I'm making it much smaller now because you don't want a massive score right in the middle of the screen. Next thing we need to do, we need to convert the integer score, because at the moment it's a whole number, an integer. We need to convert it to be a string, because otherwise it's not going to get written to the screen. It will throw an error. So when you write text to the screen in Pygame, it needs to be a string. So that's text basically, and we need to convert any integers or floats that we might use into a string. Now we don't just want the number to print to the screen, we'd also like it to say, score, this is your score. So to do that, we can now use what's known as string concatenation. So basically what we're saying here is make a new, overwrite the original variable of score, join the word score, colon, a little space, and then add in the value of score. So that will nicely print to our screen now. Next, again, we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to create a text surface object to draw the text on, and we're going to set some colors for that. So again, like this. So we're going to create our text surface object. We're going to render the string, that's important, it has to be a string of score, and we're going to set the background and foreground colors. Next, we need to create our rectangular object just as we did before, and get that onto the screen. So let's do that next. Again, make sure this is all indented in a nice line. So we're going to use the getRect functionality again. And then finally, we're going to set a start point for our text, for our rectangular object with the text on it. And I want this at the sort of top left of the screen. So if you remember, Pygame starts at 0, 0 at the very far top left of the screen. So I'm going to have it sort of 50 in and 20 down. So X and Y. So it's top left of the screen, and then we also obviously need to blit it to the screen. So that will actually put our score onto the screen. So there we have it. There is our little bit of functionality, which will now draw our score to the screen. We've got one final thing to do. We need, just like we called the main subroutine, we need to actually call the scoreboard subroutine and send it the value. Now the place to do this is where you're blitting everything else to the screen. So you can see here we're putting our rectangular grey road on the screen, we're putting our car, we're putting our truck. Now you want this to appear above everything else. Now the way a subroutine works is the code goes down. It ignores the subroutine at the top initially, and then when it sees this piece of code, it says, there's a subroutine called Scoreboard, go and do that. So it'll go up and do everything in the subroutine. When it's finished, it will come back here and then carry on. So you might have noticed after I blitted, I didn't do Pygame display.flip, and I don't need to, because once a subroutine has, made me my score text, it will actually come back to this point, carry on, check if there's a collision. If there's not, it will then update the display here. So that should now work nicely. So let's just run that code and let's have a look. Here it comes. So here you go. You can see there is our score top left of the screen. I'm happily dodging my trucks, and you can see that it is increasing. So every time I dodge a truck now, it's giving me an extra piece of an extra score. So there we have it. You now know how to get a score going, and again, making the game more interesting. And if I crash, just like before, game over comes up, and after a couple of seconds it quits out. Well, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, and I'll catch you next time where we'll continue adding functionality to our game. Bye for now.